Here we go. I've just hit the record button. Hi. It's Paul Cohen here, doing these Zoom in touch meetings with people around the world. So I'm contacting people that I know, friends, and just want to call on them to give us some kind of support and advice to help us during these times that are kind of just so getting weirder and weirder every minute. And I've done a number of them, and I'm calling on my good friend and someone I met last year, Ray Johnson, who's really, she must be really busy at the moment doing her supportive things. We can ask her. So Ray, in the somatic world, in the world of embodied experience, social justice, do you want to just say how you like the world to know you?
Sure, yeah. I wear a number of hats, but my full-time hat these days is as the chair of the somatic studies specialization in a depth psychology doctoral program at a school called Pacifica Graduate Institute, and we're in Southern California.
Awesome.
And yeah, and so mostly my full-time gig is I'm an academic. I'm a teacher and a researcher and a writer.
Yes.
My biggest area of research is the embodied experience of oppression.
Yes.
And so that's where I've been doing a lot of my teaching and presenting, and that's what I was teaching when you and I met at the embodied consciousness immersion in Berkeley, California, back last fall.
Yes.
And so that's mostly
it.
Who I am and what I do.
Yeah. So are you busy at the moment? Are people calling on you and saying, hey, you've got skills, we need to chat with you, please share something?
Yes. And I think that's one of the challenges, the opportunities, and the delights of this particular moment in time. And there's not a whole lot delightful about it, but one of the things that is that the community is coming together.
Yes.
There are somatics folks all over who are shifting gears as quickly as they can and finding ways to put opportunities online and to talk to one another. And I think what you're offering is a perfect example of that. And it's why I wanted to come and talk with you, is I thought, yeah, I want to support folks who are responding and reaching out and wanting to offer things at no charge for people who need a little bit of extra support.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's for us here, we're the 2nd of April in New Zealand.
Yes.
So we've been in lockdown, I think, for about a week or something. I mean, maybe it's a bit longer or a bit shorter, I don't know. And you in America are keep kind of fluctuating a bit. We're gonna people being mindful of being outside, people probably not being mindful. And so we're at kind of different stages in this kind of this oppression. You know, that's one of your skills, and it kind of feels atmospherically oppressive and not knowing. So my question for you at the moment is what kind of things are you seeing in people in terms of the struggles with their mental capacity and ability to cope?
Yeah.
Is there a common theme?
There is, and the way that I like to understand stress is not as sort of this thing that only people who don't have a strong constitution suffer from, but that when we're in some kind of distress, it's just an imbalance between the demands that we're facing and the resources that we have to meet those demands. And so with that kind of equation, it means that given enough demands and few enough resources, any one of could go into crisis, right?
Yeah.
And it also means that we're all carrying a different set of unique demands, some of which are externally imposed. And I think the pandemic is a perfect example of that. Everyone's kind of got this imposition of this added demand, things that we have to do that we didn't used to have to do.
Yes.
We've also lost access to resources,
Yes.
financial resources and community resources and healthcare resources and you name it. And so all of us have experienced this in our own way and to differing degrees, this simultaneous shift where we're just a little closer to our edge of what's okay for us.
Yeah, I like that edge. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, and I think this is really important to keep in mind, and I'm hearing people talk about this, so it's great to see that in fact, I think mostly we're mindful of the fact that in our society there are folks who live pretty close to that edge anyway.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
People who are elderly or ill or overstressed or under-resourced or underemployed, who live close to the edge financially or emotionally, who are dealing with serious mental health issues as an experience of everyday life, people with disabilities, people who experience racism and sexism and homophobia, their demands are greater just by virtue of their social location.
Yes. Yes.
And their access to resources sometimes is less for the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's that distress that causes stress that tips us over that edge. One of the things in sort of looking at a positive is that if you're outside in a world and you're at work and you're being victimized, but you're now at home, you might have a certain sense of relief and freedom from this as well. So it's not for some people necessarily.
And that's the thing.
That's the thing. Yes. And maybe you start to see that clearer and you go, hey, look, I realize how, really down in the dumps and oppressed I've been at work. I'm feeling better in myself. But we're kind of really wanting to outreach in a way and share things with people that life is maybe not so good and that you're stuck in this place that might feel a bit like kind of a prison in your own home,
Yeah.
And
yes.
this is the likes. Yes. We haven't experienced this. Our parents have, and we spoke a little bit about that at the immersion. And it's this is uncharted waters for lots of us. So the thing is that there'll be some people that will be in an environment that they don't have even resources, so they just replaying old patterns. And so I don't know how one can communicate with them and say, hey, look, if we all step back, hey, look, it's hard to change, isn't it? When we work with people and we go, oh man, it would be, if you could just do this, I think your life would be different and you won't have such a tough time. And then I look at myself and my patterns and I'm going, well, my patterns are really hard to shift, and then I'm suggesting to someone who might not even want to change their patterns to change their patterns. And that's like, so sorry, my head's just going around in circles, just thinking all these different scenarios that if you could kind of offer, just as part of our conversation now, if I were a couple at home and I'm not getting on very well and I want to look at how I can start having a better relationship with my partner or my husband, my wife, whatever that might be, how do you even start that as a conversation? How do we? Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know that you've got these skills just tucked under. So. Yeah.
No, it's a good question, Paul. And I think the way I would answer that question is that I don't think it starts with a conversation with one another. I think it starts with a conversation with ourselves.
Cool.
And the first thing that I encourage each of us to do, if we're feeling distress or discomfort or frustration or anxiety or depression or whatever it is, yeah?
Yeah.
The first thing that we do is not add self-blame to
Yeah.
that mix. To instead reframe as best you can
Yes.
and help yourself to understand that the discomfort and the pain and the distress or the worry or the irritability or whatever it is that's going on for you that you don't like, that the cause of that for now is probably not something that that we've all experienced this shift that's put things on our plate that we've never had to deal with before in
Yeah.
quite this way.
Yes.
This is unprecedented. This is uncharted waters, as you've said.
Yes.
And that I think the first thing that we each need to do is give ourselves a break.
Yeah. So this is
Right?
not going into the big gestalt release of stuff. This is survival mode, isn't it? Pretty much. Is that
It's
right?
and it's learning how to be responsive to changes in our environment
Yes.
without giving ourselves a hard time when we're not immediately able to pivot.
Yes. But what happens
Yeah.
if you're then in a relationship where the partner just keeps that pattern going by disempowering you and making you feel like, you know, because some people are going to be stuck in a home environment where
Yes.
how,
Yeah. Yes. And some people are in fact relishing being at home with their partners, but you're absolutely right. There will be people for whom being in such close quarters for
yes,
such a long period of time is actually making pre-existing frictions
yes, yes,
worse.
yes,
And so I'm going to go back to our equation
yes,
of distress is an imbalance between demands and resources.
yes,
So you can do two things to help bring yourself into a place where you've got a better balance and you start to feel more comfortable and more okay.
yes,
You can reduce demands
yes,
and you can add resources,
yes,
right?
yes,
So some examples of ways to reduce demands is to unhook yourself from your everyday expectations.
yeah. That's kind of
These,
easy at the moment in some ways, isn't it? You don't have to go to work.
well, yes, and for some folks, they still have the same amount of work to do, sometimes even more, only they're doing it in their kitchen on their laptop.
That's true too.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So as best you can, reduce demands.
Yes.
Let yourself off the hook. If the laundry doesn't get done, it's okay. It's okay. These are extraordinary circumstances.
Yes.
The laundry doesn't have to get done in the
Yes.
same way that it used to.
Yeah.
Cooking 3 nutritious meals a day like you used to. Or it's okay if the lawn doesn't get mowed.
Yes.
Reduce demands.
Yes.
Find a way to get by for now with expecting less of yourself
Yes.
and less of your partner,
Yes.
less of your kids.
Yes.
It's like we're all just going to give ourselves and each other a break.
Yes. Yeah.
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 So, and on the other side of that equation is add resources. So what can you do to add resources? All kinds of things. And people have started to get really creative. I know a lot of people who are taking an online yoga class, or they're participating in a regular phone call, or they're going to the park and standing 6 feet apart from their neighbors and having a conversation while they walk their dogs. They're adding resources,
Yes.
right? And every resource you add and every demand that you reduce or defer, like I'll do later, do this when this is over. Every small thing that you do will help shift that balance.
Mhm.
And to be honest with you, Paul, it's simple math. It always works.
Yes.
You just need to keep doing one or both of those two things.
Yes. Yes. And keep finding those.
Keep
Whatever.
finding them,
They're
keep
going to
looking
change
for
all the
them.
time, aren't they? Our needs will change.
Yes.
In 3 weeks' time, our conversation, if we were to have one, would be very, very different, because we would have learned lots more about how people
Yeah,
are and that mental state, and how well we are coping, how resilient we are.
exactly. So I think that's the other piece, is it can be incredibly useful for people to learn the signs of imbalance. When am I actually feeling a little bit of overwhelm? When am I actually starting to get close to my edge of, if I get pushed too much farther, I'm not going to be okay anymore, right? Or I'm going to start lashing out at my partner, or I'm going to start um, feeling really depressed, or whatever it is. So how do you learn how to tune into yourself enough, and maybe even tune into your partner or your kids enough, so that you can go, I think I'm seeing the early warning signs of being close to my edge. I'm not there yet, because it's way better, way less, collateral damage if
Yes.
you can catch yourself and reduce demands and add resources before you get to overwhelm.
Yes. Yes.
In somatic trauma language, we might call that being attentive to our window of tolerance.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, but
And so,
but when we're in relationship, my window of tolerance is not my window of tolerance on its own. It's also dependent upon I mean, I can go, I've reached my tolerance, I'll stop now. And then if I'm still bombarded with that stuff that I react to, then I'm going
yeah,
to go, I'm over that place, and I get angry and shout. I've been crying, shouting, everything, going through these things. So
yeah,
if we get there, and I suspect that lots of us will we will tilt over that place, and we will
yep,
express ourselves in some way. So it's not like you shouldn't, but how do we then deal with that? So I'm then shouting and screaming and going, holy moly, what's going
yeah,
on? And then I turn around. Do I go, I mean, I know what I do. I just said, I'm real sorry. I said, this is not you. This is me.
yeah.
This is my struggle that I'm having at this moment in time. I apologize. But so how can you give some words of how we can skillfully and tactfully be with those emotions? Particularly anger is something that is difficult for us to get to grips with, and use kind of intelligently. I'll put it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're not well trained,
No.
right? We're not well socialized.
Even if you are well trained, it's not easy.
Sometimes not. And so not only, I think, are we often not particularly good at expressing our anger in a clean, grounded, centered, focused, fair, respectful way,
Yes.
we're also not particularly good, I think, and particularly skilled at hearing someone's anger
Yes.
in a balanced, centered, grounded, respectful way.
Yes.
So it can escalate. So, I mean, you asked about a scenario. So what happens if it's like, it's too late? I've already blurted. I've already kind of lost my temper, or lost my cool, and now I need to apologize. And I think the example that you gave is a great one. Absolutely, apologize, own what happened,
Yeah.
take responsibility for your own actions and your own behavior.
Yeah.
Check in with the other person. Ask them what impact did that have on you? How are you doing?
Yes.
And as best you can, see, collectively add some resources to your relationship,
Yes. Yeah.
right? What could we do? So this has been hard for both of us. I just lost my temper with you for something stupid, and I realized it was stupid, and I've apologized, and you've accepted my apology, but how do we keep this from happening again.
Yes. Yes.
When you're both place where you're able to communicate and able to sort of have a conversation without a whole lot of emotional charge.
Yes.
Sit down and go, okay, so what would help us feel as though we're more nurtured in this relationship?
Yes. Yes.
And come up with your own list of things that you can do.
Yes.
Oh, well, this would be helpful. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, let's do that. Oh, let's do movie night. Okay, well, and everyone's going to come up with their own ideas.
Yes.
So there's no set thing to do.
No.
Except have the conversation.
Yes.
Have the conversation and say what would feel nourishing, what would feel resourcing, what would feel generous and kind, or supportive, and do as much of that as you can when you're in a place to do it, because you're going to draw on that bank account.
Yes.
Right? You're going to draw on that bank account the next time something happens and someone gets impatient and nerves get frayed. But then you've got some buffer because you're still kind of full and enjoying and appreciating the nice things that you just did together, yesterday.
Yes.
Or that morning.
Yeah.
You had a lovely breakfast. You cooked for one another. Wow, that was so nice. So even though in the afternoon something's happened that's pissed me off,
Yes.
right? Or whatever. Love. Right? And we're talking about this in terms of partner, but the same is true for kids. Same is true for parents who might be living in, it's true for anyone that you're in relationship with.
Yes.
How can you feed the relationship when you have the capacity to add resources to it?
Yes. Yes.
So that you've got something in the bank.
Yeah. Because it's disproportionate, isn't it? You have a fantastic day, one little thing happens bad for 5 seconds, and the whole of the rest of the day is filled with that 5 seconds. So life isn't all bad. So if someone was listening to this and they thought, hey, look, I'd like to explore some of these kind of cool things that Ray's talking about,
Yep.
can you give us a 5-minute little exercise? If two people said, hey, look, we're going to do a bit of role playing or a bit of skill developing, can you come up with something that I can then go to my partner and say, hey, look, I've listened, how about listening to this? Ray's suggested this really cool thing. Let's try. What would you come up with?
Well, what I would suggest is, one, try this in a moment, not while, emotions are still running high.
Yeah.
Wait till everybody's cooled down. Wait till everybody's kind of in a place that's sort of neutral and there's a little bit of breathing room.
Yes.
And then what I would suggest is just have a sit down with your kid or with your dad or with your partner and just go, all right, I'm trying to find some ways to help us through when times get tough again, and they're probably going to get tough again before we're done, right? And is there anything that I could offer to you that would feel nice or kind or supportive? Is there something I could say? Is there something I could do for you? Is there something that we could do together that would feel nourishing?
Cool. That on its own is amazing, isn't it? That just,
Yeah.
because that's a gift, because already I feel some kind of change happening around our conversation. And if I'll just briefly interrupt, it reminded me, and I'll let you go again if you don't mind, it reminded me of going to a local hardware store, and there was one of the people that was working there was quite grumpy, and you never really related to him much. And for some reason I was with my brother there and I had a rose in my hand, and I went up to him and I said his name and I said, this rose is for you, and I smiled. And from that moment onwards we had this really nice relationship. Just it was that said, because what happens is that he was moody and not very communicative, and I was moody and not very communicative back to him. But then when I changed that, it changed the whole thing. So that what you're suggesting there is just saying, hey, look, how can I be in this environment that can really be supportive. I'll let you do your words. Sorry, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think what's important is that we take advantage of the moments that we have where we've got a little bit to spare.
Yes.
And that's when we get generous. Then we go, how could I spread this around? How could I give this person a rose?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that you're doing it from this place of, I feel resourced. This is not me being a martyr. This is not me giving something to someone at a cost to myself.
Yeah.
This is me going, I'm okay now. And so how could I spread that around a little bit? Because what happens when you spread it around, of course, and your story is a perfect illustration, is that it comes back to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think you've given away the rose, but in fact, you get the rose back.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to screw up, and then it's really very, very okay to say, I'm sorry, I screwed up and I didn't do that very skillfully. I'm going to try again. Isn't it like that? You keep trying. It's not like you get somewhere and it's, I know how to deal with stress or de-stress.
No. Of course not. Of course not.
No,
And
I know that.
And being able to apologize and admit mistakes
Yes.
is just an incredibly useful relationship skill.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't learned how to do that well, then that's a good thing to practice.
Yes.
And if you do it too much, that's maybe a good time to go, maybe I don't need to apologize for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe just because that person is short-tempered, it doesn't mean that I've caused them to be short-tempered.
Yeah.
Maybe that's actually on them. So that goes both ways. But really what I'm talking about here is that when we're at close quarters, the number of small little injuries that we do to one another kind of goes up.
Yes. The microaggressions.
Well, I wouldn't use the term microaggressions here because that term is reserved for when there's a social difference and a power imbalance.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would say, little small relational injuries, these little tiny things, irritations, unkindnesses, thoughtlessnesses, whatever.
Yes.
And so we need to deliberately balance them out with these little an extra smile, and just do those small moments of connection every chance you get.
Yes.
Every time you've got just a little bit of something extra.
Yes.
Donate it to the pool because it'll come back.
Yes.
And you can survive on that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So when I interrupted you telling the story, or not interrupted you, when I shared my story as part of the conversation, and you were saying that it's good to, if you could say, hey, look, how can I, can I do something different that will support the family?
Yes.
So after you've had that kind of conversation, then that gets shared around, possibly, that then the wife talks and then the kids talk and the kids say, hey, look.
Yeah. You could have a family conversation.
Family thing.
Yeah.
So what happened? Sorry, go on.
I would just add to that, because up until now, this conversation hasn't been particularly focused on the body. And so let's bring that in.
Cool, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the body's sort of really been present in this whole conversation without us really naming it as such.
Yes.
And so one of the things that can be lovely is if you're in a family group or you're with your partner, is to actually support one another's bodies to feel good.
Yes.
Go outside and push your kids on the swing if you've got a swing set, you know? Do something that allows pleasure to be filtered through the system.
Yes.
Bodily pleasure. Find small ways. A meal, or smelling some flowers, or listening to some music, but take as many chances and opportunities as you can find.
Yes.
To give yourself and to share with other people just as much bodily pleasure,
Yes,
as you can get your hands on.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So I might do some online body work for people too, because I think that I can, that's one of my plans to do as well. But okay, so can I change the scenario a tiny bit? So
Sure.
what happens if A, I'm on my own, or B,
Yes.
I'm wanting to do this, but my partner doesn't give a toss and is really quite adamant that he's not going to go down this road of the way that we're suggesting. So how do those?
not gonna have any part of this new age weirdness.
No. So let's talk about the couple that the husband isn't. It's not in his field of vision, and that's fair enough, because some people in the world now are going to be thinking, you know, how can I financially benefit from this? Some people are going to be thinking, how can I politically gain from this? And other people are going, how can I go into myself and work out my demons? And some people go, how can I just be present now and feel good? Yep. You know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So this. Yeah. Okay.
And it's really no different than every day. We all have different agendas.
Yes.
We all have different values. We all have different orientations on the world.
Yes. All of us.
And so all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's 8 billion people in the world, and we all see the world differently. Whatever, 2 billion Christians, and they all see Christianity different. No one sees this the same.
Exactly. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that if you find the differences in perspective between you and your partner seem more stark, right? Mm-hmm. Because of what's happening. It's like, oh, they're totally not into, and here's the important part.
Yes.
They're totally not into coping with this the way I want to cope with this.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
There isn't one right way to cope with it.
No.
Some of us better than others, and we can be coping equally well using very different strategies.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I think that's important. I think in that example that you cited of, you know, maybe one person in the couple doesn't want to do the nonsense of, you know, talking about our feelings and, you know, offering each other, you know, little generous kindnesses. They don't want to do that. That's not how they're coping. They're coping by watching the news and staying informed and being strategic. Yes. And, you know, laying in supplies.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Yes.
That it would be a mistake to assume that my way of coping is the best way.
Yes.
And that if other people in my life, my family members, my partner, my kids, my neighbors, my friends, that if they're not coping in the same way that I am, somehow they're failing to cope.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Not true. No.
So we need to be respectful of those differences.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a phrase I like to use. It's a little bit technical, but I'll say it the way I usually say it, and then we can unpack it.
Yes.
Which is, when I try to regulate myself, when I try to manage my own distress level,
yes,
and my own capacity to self-regulate,
yes,
has been exceeded, one of the things that many of us, I think, pretty easily slide into is, I'm going to try to calm myself down or make myself feel better by regulating you.
Yes.
Right?
That's what I want. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks, me working, doesn't it? I want you to change, not me.
And it's not, and sometimes, to be fair, it's not so much, I want you to change, not me. It's, I have exceeded my capacity to cope with this.
Yes. Yeah.
And the only way I can keep myself from complete rage, whatever it is I'm trying to do, the only way I can do this is to get the world around me to calm down.
Yes.
Or to stop doing this thing that's triggering to me.
Yes.
So it's not always entirely like you do it, not me. It's I'm at my capacity.
Yes.
And so the impulse to try to get the environment to change in order to help support us to be okay is actually, it's quite understandable. I think many of us do it. And rightly so. It's we're trying to survive, right? We're trying to not freak out.
Yes.
And when you find yourself in that moment where I think, whoa, I'm just, I'm about 1.5 inches away from totally losing it, that maybe instead of attempting to prevent yourself from losing it by telling everybody else in your world what to do, might be a good time to take a break, put yourself a little time out, and just remove yourself from the stimuli that are pushing you over the edge. Rather than trying to get those things to change, just remove yourself from them. Yes. Give yourself a timeout.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. If you can remove yourself, because some people.
If you can go outside into the backyard if you've got one, or if you can walk into another room. I mean, I can tell you there are times where I've spent longer in the bathroom than I needed to, mostly because I was giving myself a timeout, and that was the only room that felt like I could close the door and people wouldn't bug me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But it's the time that I needed.
Yes.
And I stayed in there as long as I needed to. It's
Yes.
like, it's adult timeout.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So could you give someone, so if I'm going, hey, I want the world to change, I know I need to do this myself, I need to take the responsibility, because I've listened to Ray talking, I realized and so now I found my little place that is of solitude, and I'm on my own. So what I do, go into my breath, go into my body. Can you give us a little technique? Simple.
Sure, yeah, there's all kinds of them, and you've named 2 of them right there. Although sometimes checking in with how I'm feeling in my body actually makes things worse because I'm freaked out.
Yes.
Right. So yeah. Sometimes going in and checking in how I'm doing is not necessarily the first strategy I would use, yes. But slowing down your breath.
Slowing down the breath.
And noticing if I'm breathing up really high in my chest, is there a way that maybe I could, and I often don't actually suggest that people take a nice deep diaphragmatic breath, because sometimes that's overwhelming. But yes. Can I create a little space in between my shoulder blades and sort of breathe into the space in between my shoulders?
Yeah.
Okay. And can I feel my feet?
Yeah.
And can I feel my seat if I'm sitting down? And if I'm standing up, would it feel better if I sat down?
Yeah.
Centering and grounding.
Yeah. Yeah.
However you do that, through your body, through your breath, through your awareness of your feet. Sometimes it's helpful to, once you've sort of settled into your body, find some way to gain perspective. And so I will often suggest to clients, for example, go look out a window. Like, increase your field of vision beyond what's 6 inches in front of your nose. And then take a breath again, right? And look way off into the distance if you can. Yeah. It's a literal way through our vision and our visual senses to remind ourselves of our ability to regain perspective when we've lost it. Because sometimes the freak out is mostly about a loss of perspective.
Yes. Yes.
We're not able to pan back.
Yeah.
So those are some really simple things that I often say.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think, and all the people that I've been talking to, we're all going simple. We need to do something simple. It's not, you don't need to learn some complicated geometric yogic form or some complicated, it's like
No.
the coming back to just a breath, coming back into a pattern of balance of some description.
Yeah.
I think is really important. Krishnamurti says no condemnation and no acceptance. So you don't condemn yourself, and also don't accept your thoughts. I mean, they're useful, but they're kind of made up, and we could make up some other thoughts. So if
yes,
and you just go, well, these are part of my history. This is just that being replayed in some form or other, and be hard. We're really hard on ourselves, aren't we? You know that.
we're really hard on ourselves, and we lose perspective.
We put ourselves down. I remember being in a group of over 50 people, and I said, hey, look, I can't remember the exact words I used, but it was something like, who's negative about themselves and puts themselves down regularly? And everybody put their hand up in a group of people who have been doing body work and this kind of stuff for a long, long time. So just to be kind on ourselves. Really, isn't it?
Yeah. And to each other.
Yeah, and to each other. Can we have a chat again? Can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this. I'm gonna, because I know you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close? Because I know you've been tired because you're.
Yeah, it's been an incredibly busy time for me. I'm transitioning all of my students in my graduate program over to online learning, and just, oh my goodness, we're pivoting. And lots of people I know, not just me, but lots of people we're all just pivoting like crazy.
Yes.
But yes, I'm happy to have another conversation, because this has been a pleasure. It's always nice to connect with you. So let's find another time as we settle in for what looks like it's going to be a little bit of a long haul. Yeah.
You're hearing lots of different things, and this uncertain world that everybody says is uncertain anyway, feels really uncertain.
Yes, now it actually feels that way. It's been harder to maintain the illusion of stability.
Yes,
these days.
And what did Ram Dass say after he had his stroke? He says, "I'm now beginning to understand what be here now is all about." And I think we're kind of lumped in that place because this is here and this is now. We can't escape. We can't go down the pub and have a drink. Can't. It's very, very different world. What I'll do is I'll sign off in a minute, but I'll stop the recording and then we'll have a couple of minute chat, and so we can just say goodbye. But thank you so much, Ray. It's been a real treat. Real pleasure. Thank you so much. And
of course, my pleasure too.
Namaste to you. So I'm going to stop recording. Thank you.